Hello, 8th grade. Today we are reading from your Of Places literature book. We're on page 48, reading Men of Iron by Howard Pyle. I'm starting with the tan box. The 1400s in England was an age of chivalry. A knight fought for his lord's lands and treasure, his lady's glory, and his own honor. Within the court, Richard II has been dethroned by his cousin, Henry IV, and Lord Falworth, once a favorite of the king, has been tried, found guilty, and blinded for his allegiance to Richard. Under the authority of the Earl of Mackworth, Miles begins his training as a squire, hoping one day to redeem his father's name, honor, and fortune. Here we go. For a little time there was a pause of deep silence, during which the fluttering leaves came drifting down from the broken arbor above. It was the Lady Anne who spoke first. It was the Lady Anne who first spoke. "Who art thou, and whence comest thou?" said she tremulously. Then Miles gathered himself up sheepishly. "My name is Miles Falworth," said he, "and I am one of the squires of the body." "Oh, I," said Lady Alice suddenly. "Methought I knew thy face. Art thou not the young man that I have seen in Lord George's train?" "Yes, lady," said Miles, wrapping and twining a piece of the broken vine in and out among his fingers. "Lord George hath often had me of late about his person." "And what dost thou do here, sirrah?" said Lady Anne angrily. "How darest thou come so into our garden?" "I mean not to come as I did," said Miles clumsily and with a face hot and red, "but I slipped over the top of the wall and fell hastily into the garden. Truly, lady, I meant you no harm or fright thereby." He looked so drolly abashed as he stood before them, with his clothes torn and soiled from the fall, his face red, and his eyes downcast, all the while industriously twisting the piece of clematis in and around his fingers, that Lady Anne's half-frightened anger could not last. She and her cousin exchanged glances and smiled at one another. "But," she said at last, trying to draw her pretty brows together into a frown, "tell me, why didst thou seek to climb the wall?" "I came to seek a ball," said Miles, "which I struck over hither from the court beyond." "And wouldst thou come into our privy garden for no better reason than to find a ball?" said the young lady. "Nay," said Miles, "it was not so much to find the ball, but in good sooth I did truly strike it harder than need be, and so, gin I lost the ball, I could do no less than come and find it again, else our sport is done for the day. So it was I came hither." At the top of page 49, it says, as you read, see if you can determine the protagonist and antagonist of the story. The protagonist is the main character or hero who is usually in conflict with the antagonist, and the antagonist is an opposing character or rival in conflict with the protagonist. Let's keep going. The two young ladies had by now recovered from their fright. The Lady Anne slyly nudged her cousin with her elbow, and the younger could not suppress a half-nervous laugh. Miles heard it, and felt his face grow hotter and redder than ever. "My name be'st Miles," corrected Miles. "Very well then, Master Miles. I say I do believe that thou meanest no harm in coming hither. Nevertheless, it was ill of thee to do so. And my father should find thee here, he would have thee shrewdly punished for such trespassing. Dost thou not know that no one is permitted to enter this place? No, not even my Uncle George. One fellow who came hither to steal apples once had his ears shaven close to his head. And not more than a year ago, one of the cook's men who climbed the wall early one morning was shot by the watchman." "Aye," said Miles, "I knew of him who was shot, and it did go somewhat against my stomach to venture, knowing what had happened to him. Nevertheless, and I got not the ball, how are we to play more today at the trap?" "Marry, thou art a bold fellow, I do believe me," said the young lady. "And sin thou hast come in the face of such peril to get thy ball, thou shalt not go away empty. Whither didst thou strike it?" "Over yonder by the cherry tree," said Miles, jerking his head in that direction. "And may I go get it, I will trouble ye no more." As he spoke, he made a motion to leave them. "Stay," said the Lady Anne hastily. "Remain where thou art. As thou cross the open, someone may haply see thee from the house, and will give the alarm, and thou wilt be lost. I will go get thy ball." And so she left Miles and her cousin, crossing the little plots of grass and skirting the rose bushes to the cherry tree. When Miles found himself alone with Lady Alice, he knew not where to look or what to do, but twisted the piece of clematis which he still held in and out more industriously than ever. Lady Alice watched him with dancing eyes for a little while. "Haply thou wilt spoil that poor vine," said she by and by, breaking the silence and laughing, then turning suddenly serious again. "Didst thou hurt thyself by thy fall?" "Nay," said Myles, looking up. "Such a fall as that was no great matter. Many and many a time I have had worse." "Hast thou so?" said the Lady Alice. "Thou didst fright me parlously, and my coz likewise." Myles hesitated for a moment, and then blurted out, "Thereat I grieve. For thee I would not fright for all the world." The young lady laughed and blushed. "All the world is a great matter," said she. "Yea," said he, "it is a great matter, but it is a greater matter to fright thee, and so I would not do it for that, and more." The young lady laughed again, but she did not say anything further, and a space of silence fell so long that by and by she forced herself to say, "My cousin findeth not the ball presently." "Nay," said Myles, briefly, and then again neither spoke until by and by the Lady Anne came, bringing the ball. Myles felt a great sense of relief at that coming, and yet was somehow sorry. Then he took the ball, and knew enough to bow his acknowledgment in a manner neither ill nor awkward. "Didst thou hurt thyself?" asked Lady Anne. "Nay," said Myles, giving himself a shake. "Seest thou not I be whole, limb and bone? Nay, I have had shrewdly worse falls than that. Once I fell out of an oak tree down by the river and upon a root, and bethought me I did break a rib or more. And then one time when I was a boy in Crosby Dale, that was where I lived before I came hither, I did catch me hold of the blade of the windmill, thinking it was moving slowly, and that I would have a ride in the air, and so was like to have had a fall 10,000 times worse than this." "Oh, tell us more of that," said the Lady Anne eagerly. "I did never hear of such an adventure as that. Come, coz, and sit down here upon the bench, and let us have him tell us all of that happening." Now the lads upon the other side of the wall had been whistling furtively for some time, not knowing whether Myles had broken his neck or had come off scot-free from his fall. "I would like right well to stay with ye," said he irresolutely, "and would gladly tell ye that and more, and ye would have me to do so. But hear ye not my friends call me from beyond? Mayhap they think I break my back, and are calling to see whether I be alive or no. And I might whistle them answer, and toss me this ball to them. All would then be well, and they would know that I was not hurt, and so haply would go away." "Then answer them," said the Lady Anne, "and tell us of that thing thou spokest of anon, how thou tookest a ride upon the windmill. We young ladies do hear little of such matters, not being allowed to talk with lads. All that we hear of perils are of knights and ladies and jousting, and such like. It would pleasure us right well to have thee tell of thy adventures." So Myles tossed back the ball and whistled in answer to his friends. Then he told the two young ladies not only of his adventure upon the windmill, but also of other boyish escapades, and told them well, with a straightforward smack and vigor, for he enjoyed adventure and loved to talk of it. In a little while he had regained his ease, his shyness and awkwardness left him, and nothing remained but the delightful fact that he was really and actually talking to two young ladies, and that with just as much ease and infinitely more pleasure than could be had in discourse with his fellow squires. But at last it was time for him to go. "Mary," said he, with a half sigh, "methinks I did never have so sweet and pleasant a time in all my life before. Never did I know a real lady to talk with, saving only my mother. And I do tell you plain, methinks I would rather talk with ye than any he in Christendom, saving perhaps only my friend Gascon. I would I might come hither again." The honest frankness of his speech was irresistible. The two girls exchanged glances, and then began laughing. "Truly," said Lady Anne, who, as was said before, was some 3 or 4 years older than Myles, "thou art a bold lad to ask such a thing. How wouldst thou come hither? Wouldst tumble through our clematis arbor again, as thou didst this day?" "Nay," said Myles, "I would not do that again, but if ye would bid me do so, I will find the means to come hither." "Nay," said Lady Anne, "I dare not bid thee do such a foolhardy thing. Nevertheless, if thou hast the courage to come—" "Yea," said Myles eagerly, "I have the courage." "Then if thou hast so, we will be here in the garden on Saturday next at this hour. I would like right well to hear of more of thy adventures. But what didst thou say was thy name? I have forgot it again. It is Miles Falworth. Then we shall yclept thee, Sir Miles, for thou art a soothly errant knight. And stay, every knight must have a lady to serve. How wouldst thou like my cousin Alice here for thy true lady? Ay, said Miles eagerly, I would like it right well. And then he blushed fiery red at his boldness. I want no errant knight to serve me, said the Lady Alice, blushing in answer. Thou dost ill tease me, coz, and thou art so free in choosing him a lady to serve. Thou mayest choose him thyself for thy pains. Nay, said the Lady Anne, laughing, I say thou shalt be his true lady, and he shall be thy true knight. Who knows? Perchance he may serve thee in some wondrous adventure, like as Chaucer telleth of. But now, Sir Errant Knight, thou must take thy leave of us, and I must e'en let thy privily out by the postern wicket. And if thou wilt take the risk upon thee and come hither again, prithee be wary in that coming, lest in venturing thou have thine ears clipped in the most unknightly fashion. That evening, as he and Grayskin sat together on a bench under the trees in the great quadrangle, Miles told of his adventure of the afternoon, and his friend listened with breathless interest. But Miles, cried Grayskin, did the Lady Anne never once seem proud and unkind? Nay, said Miles, only at first, when she chid me for falling through the roof of their arbor. And to think, Francis, Lady Anne herself bade me hold the Lady Alice as my true lady, and to serve her in all knightliness. Then he told his friend that he was going to the Privy Garden again on the next Saturday, and that the Lady Anne had given him permission so to do. Grayskin gave a long, wondering whistle, and then sat quite still, staring into the sky. By and by he turned to his friend and said, I give thee my pledge, Miles Falworth, that never in all my life did I hear of anyone that had such marvelous strange happenings befall him as thou. Whenever the opportunity occurred for sending a letter to Crosby Holt, Miles wrote one to his mother, and one can guess how they were treasured by the good lady, and read over and over again to the blind old lord as he sat staring into darkness with his sightless eyes. After this first acquaintance, perhaps a month passed, during which Miles had climbed the wall some half a dozen times, for the Lady Anne would not permit of too frequent visits, and during which the first acquaintance of three ripened rapidly to an honest, pleasant friendship. More than once, Miles, when in Lord George's train, caught a covert smile or half nod from one or both of the girls, not a little delightful in its very secret friendliness. One Saturday afternoon he climbed the garden wall, and skirting behind a long row of rose bushes that screened him from the Countess's terrace, came to a little summer house where the two young ladies had appointed to meet him that day. A pleasant half hour or so was passed, and then it was time for Miles to go. He lingered for a while before he took his final leave, leaning against the doorpost and laughingly telling how he and some of his brother squires had made a figure of straw dressed in men's clothes, and had played a trick with it one night upon a watchman against whom they bore a grudge. The young ladies were listening with laughing faces, when suddenly, as Miles looked, he saw the smile vanish from Lady Alice's eyes, and a wide terror take its place. She gave a half-articulate cry, and rose abruptly from the bench upon which she was sitting. Miles turned sharply, and then his very heart seemed to stand still within him. For there, standing in the broad sunlight without, and glaring in upon the party with baleful eyes, was the Earl of Mackworth himself. How long was the breathless silence that followed, Miles could never tell. He knew that the Lady Anne had also risen, and that she and her cousin were standing as still as statues. Presently, the Earl pointed to the house with his staff, and Miles noted stupidly how it trembled in his hand. Ye wenches, said he at last, in a hard, harsh voice. Ye wenches, what meaneth this? Would ye deceive me so, and hold parlance thus secretly with this fellow? I will settle with him anon. Meantime, get ye straightway into the house, and to your rooms, and there abide until I give ye leave to come forth again. Go, I say. Father, said Lady Anne in a breathless voice. She was as white as death, and moistened her lips with her tongue before she spoke. Father, thou wilt not do harm to this young man. Spare him, I do beseech ye, for truly it was I who bade him come hither. I know that he would not have come but at our bidding. Page 52. The earl stamped his foot upon the gravel. Did ye not hear me? Said he, still pointing toward the house with his trembling staff. I bade ye go to your rooms. I will settle with this fellow, I say, as I deem fitting. Father, began Lady Anne again, but the earl made such a savage gesture that poor Lady Alice uttered a faint shriek, and Lady Anne stopped abruptly, trembling. Then she turned and passed out the farther door of the summer house, poor little Lady Alice following, holding her tight by the skirts and trembling and shuddering as though with a fit of the ague. The earl stood looking grimly after them from under his shaggy eyebrows until they passed away behind the yew trees, appeared again upon the terrace behind, entered the open doors of the women's house, and were gone. Miles heard their footsteps growing fainter and fainter, but he never raised his eyes. Upon the ground at his feet were 4 pebbles, and he noticed how they almost made a square, and would do so if he pushed one of them with his toe. And then it seemed strange to him that he should think of such a little foolish thing at that dreadful time. He knew that the earl was looking gloomily at him, and that his face must be very pale. Suddenly Lord Mackworth spoke. What hast thou to say? Said he harshly. Then Miles raised his eyes, and the earl smiled grimly as he looked his victim over. I have naught to say, said the lad huskily. Didst thou not hear what my daughter spake but now? Said the earl. She said that thou came not of thy own free will. What sayest thou to that, sirrah? Is it true? Miles hesitated for a moment or two. His throat was tight and dry. Nay, said he at last, she believeth herself. It was I who first came into the garden. I fell by chance from the tree yonder. I was seeking a ball. Then I asked those 2 if I might not come hither again, and so have done some several times in all. But as for her, nay, it was not at her bidding that I came, but through mine own asking. The earl gave a little grunt in his throat. And how often hast thou been here? Said he presently. Miles thought a moment or two. This maketh the 7th time, said he. Another pause of silence followed, and Miles began to pluck up some heart that maybe all would yet be well. The earl's next speech dashed that hope into 1,000 fragments. Well, thou knowest, said he, that it is forbid for any to come here. Thou knowest that twice have men been punished for this thing that thou hast done, and yet thou camest in spite of all. Now dost thou know what thou wilt suffer? Miles picked with nervous fingers at a crack in the oaken post against which he leaned. Mayhap thou wilt kill me, said he at last in a dull, choking voice. Again the earl smiled a grim smile. Nay, said he, I would not slay thee, for thou hast gentle blood. But what sayest thou, should I shear thine ears from thine head, or perchance have thee scourged in the great court? The sting of these words sent the blood flying back to Miles's face again, and he looked quickly up. Nay, said he, with a boldness that surprised himself, thou shalt do no such unlordly thing upon me as that. I be thy peer, sir, in blood, and though thou mayest kill me, thou hast no right to shame me. Lord Mackworth bowed with mocking courtesy. Marry, said he, methought it was one of mine own saucy popinjay squires that I caught sneaking in here and talking to those 2 foolish young lasses. And lo, it is a young lord, or mayhap thou art a young prince, and commandeth me that I shall not do this, and I shall not do that. I crave your lordship's honorable pardon if I have said aught that may have galled you. The fear Miles had felt was now beginning to dissolve in rising wrath. Nay, said he stoutly, I be no lord, and I be no prince, but I be as good as thou. For am I not the son of thy one time very true comrade and thy kinsman? To wit, the Lord Falworth, whom, as thou knowest, is poor and broken and blind and helpless and outlawed and banned? Yet, cried he, grinding his teeth, as the thought of it all rushed in upon him, I would rather be in his place than in yours. For though he be ruined, you, He had just enough sense to stop there. The Earl, gripping his staff behind his back and with his head a little bent, was looking keenly at the lad from under his shaggy gray brows. "Well," said he, as Miles stopped, "thou hast gone too far now to draw back. Why wouldst thou rather be in thy father's stead than in mine?" Miles did not answer. "Thou shalt finish thy speech, or else show thyself a coward. Though thy father is ruined, thou didst say I am what?" Miles keyed himself up to the effort, and then blurted out, "Thou art attainted with shame." A long, breathless silence followed. "Miles Falworth," said the Earl at last, and even in the whirling of his wits, Miles wondered that he had the name so pat. "Miles Falworth, of all the bold, mad, harebrained fools, thou art the most foolish. How dost thou dare say such words to me? Dost thou not know that thou makest thy coming punishment 10 times more bitter by such a speech?" "Aye," cried Miles desperately, "but what else could I do? And I did not say the words, thou callest me a coward, and coward I am not." "By'r Lady," said the Earl, "I do believe thee. Thou art a bold, impudent varlet as ever lived. Beard me so forsooth. Harkye, thou sayest, I think not of mine old comrade. I will show thee that thou dost belie me. I will suffer what thou hast said to me for his sake, and for his sake will forgive thee thy coming hither, which I would not do in another case to any other man. Now get thee gone straightway, and come hither no more. Play no more pranks, and thou wouldest keep thy skin whole. And now go, I say." Miles needed no further bidding, but turned and left the Earl without another word. As he went out the postern gate, he looked over his shoulder and saw the tall figure in its long fur-trimmed gown, still standing in the middle of the path, looking after him from under the shaggy eyebrows. As he ran across the quadrangle, his heart still fluttering in his breast, he muttered to himself, "The old grizzle-beard! And I had not faced him a bold front, mayhap he would have put such shame upon me as he said. I wonder why he stood so staring after me as I left the garden." Then for the time the matter slipped from his mind, saving only that part that smacked of adventure. At the bottom of page 53 it says, "Unknown to Miles, Lord Falworth and the Earl of Mackworth are secretly working together to conduct a plan to have Miles knighted by the king. However, Miles has a long journey ahead of him and will face many obstacles. Will the plan work, or will the events along the way destroy Miles's chance of ever becoming a knight?" Now, take out a clean sheet of paper and answer the Think It Through section numbers 1 through 8. See you in class.